The moment Ethan Cole realized he didn't belong wasn't when the bride's family ignored his greeting at the door. It wasn't when he found his name scribbled on a place card at table 17, practically behind a decorative column in the darkest corner of the ballroom. It was when Victoria Hale, a woman he'd never met, sat down across from him and asked a single question that would unravel everything he thought he knew about worth, status, and the strange mathematics of human connection. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I tell you what happened that night at the Montgomery wedding, before I explain how a forgotten table became the center of Chicago's most exclusive social event, I need you to understand something about being invisible. So stick with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Because what happened to Ethan that November night? It could happen to any of us. Ethan Cole was running exactly 14 minutes late, which meant he was right on schedule for ruining what was supposed to be his one good night in months. He stood outside the Peninsula Hotel on East Superior Street, staring up at the golden light spilling from the ballroom windows on the 5th floor, and seriously considered getting back in his car. The valet had already taken his keys, his beat-up Honda Civic now presumably hidden somewhere behind the row of Mercedes and Teslas lining the circular drive, but he could ask for it back. He could text his sister that something came up with Jamie. She'd understand. She always understood when he bailed on things. The November wind cut through his suit jacket like it had a personal grudge. He'd bought the suit 4 years ago for his brother's wedding, back when he'd been a different person living a different life, back when he'd had someone to attend weddings with. The jacket fit differently now, tighter across the shoulders from carrying Jamie everywhere, looser in the waist from the kind of meals you eat standing over a sink after your kid goes to bed. You going in or decorating the sidewalk? Ethan turned. A man in his 60s, silver-haired and comfortable-looking in an expensive overcoat, smiled at him with the particular kindness of someone who'd once stood outside a fancy hotel having the same internal argument. "Yeah," Ethan said. "Yeah, I'm going in." "Good man." The older gentleman clapped him on the shoulder. "Open bar, might as well get your money's worth." Except Ethan hadn't paid for his plate. Rachel Montgomery, the bride, his old college friend, had insisted the invitation was a gift. "You deserve a night out," she'd said when she called 3 weeks ago. "When's the last time you did something for yourself?" He'd made the mistake of being honest. "I don't remember." She'd gone quiet for a moment, then practically ordered him to attend. "No arguments, Ethan. You're coming. You need this." What he'd needed was the $200 he'd spent on a wedding gift he couldn't afford, new dress shoes because his old ones had given up the ghost, and the $40 he'd slipped his sister for watching Jamie overnight. But Rachel had sounded so genuinely happy to include him that saying no felt like admitting something he wasn't ready to admit. That he'd become the kind of person people invited to things out of pity. The lobby was all marble and soft lighting, the kind of place where even the air felt expensive. A small sign with elegant calligraphy directed wedding guests to the grand ballroom. Ethan followed a couple in their 40s, the woman's dress probably cost more than his monthly rent, toward the elevators. "Did you see the gift they registered for at Williams-Sonoma?" the woman was saying. "A $900 blender. Who spends $900 on a blender?" "People who have $900, her husband replied. Ethan studied his shoes during the elevator ride. The couple got off on the 4th floor, heading to some pre-ceremony cocktail thing he apparently hadn't been invited to. He rode up one more floor alone, his reflection in the brass doors showing him exactly what he already knew. He looked like someone trying very hard to look like he belonged. The ballroom entrance was decorated with white roses and something twinkly that might have been lights or just crystals catching the chandelier glow. A blonde woman in a headset, wedding coordinator probably, smiled at him with professional warmth. "Welcome. Are you bride or groom?" "Bride. Ethan Cole." She consulted her tablet, scrolling longer than seemed necessary. "Ah, table 17. Straight back, just past the dance floor, behind the... You'll see it." "Behind the what?" he wanted to ask, but she was already greeting the next arrival with the same efficient brightness. Ethan made his way into the ballroom and stopped, momentarily stunned despite himself. The space was transformed into something from a movie he couldn't afford to see in theaters. Hundreds of white roses climbed up tall centerpieces on every table. Candles flickered in glass holders that caught the light from 3 massive chandeliers overhead. A string quartet played something classical and complicated in the corner. And everywhere, absolutely everywhere, were people who looked expensive. Not rich person costume expensive, but actually, casually, generationally wealthy in a way that made Ethan feel like he was wearing a sign that said "doesn't belong here" in neon letters. He found table 17 exactly where the coordinator's tone had suggested it would be. In the back corner, partially obscured by a decorative column wrapped in more white roses. Not technically hidden, but definitely out of the way. The kind of table where you put people you had to invite but didn't particularly want to see. 5 place settings. 2 couples were already seated, all strangers. They looked up when Ethan approached, offered polite smiles, then immediately returned to their conversation about someone's lake house in Michigan. The empty chair had a place card with his name written in the same fancy calligraphy as the lobby sign. Ethan sat down, adjusted his napkin, checked his phone even though he'd checked it in the elevator. A text from his sister. "Jamie down at 7:30, only cried for 5 minutes. You good?" He typed back, "Yeah. Thanks again, Mel." The truth was, he felt guilty. Not just about leaving Jamie, though that guilt was its own constant companion, but about wanting to leave Jamie, even for one night. What kind of father looked forward to a night without his kid? But the apartment had been so quiet lately, so small. The walls seemed to be contracting a little more each day, and sometimes when he was giving Jamie a bath or reading the same board book for the 1000th time, he felt something close to panic rising in his chest. Not that he didn't love his daughter. He'd burn the world down for her. But loving someone and occasionally needing a break from constant single parenthood were 2 things that turned out to be true at the same time. The ceremony started 20 minutes later. Everyone stood as Rachel appeared at the far end of the ballroom, and even from table 17, partially blocked by the column, Ethan could see she looked happy. Actually happy. Not wedding day performing happy. She'd met Marcus, the groom, in graduate school, and they had that easy chemistry of people who genuinely liked each other. Ethan felt a complicated mix of happiness for her and something else he didn't want to name. Envy, maybe. Or just the specific loneliness of watching other people's lives work out. The ceremony was short. Traditional vows, tears from Rachel's mom, polite laughter at the officiant's rehearsed jokes about marriage. When they kissed, the room erupted in applause. Ethan clapped along with everyone else, feeling like an audience member in someone else's story. Then came dinner. The couples at table 17 had found enough common ground to sustain steady conversation. Lake houses led to discussions of boat maintenance, which somehow evolved into a lengthy debate about property taxes in different counties. They were perfectly nice people, and they'd included Ethan in the initial round of introductions, but it had been clear within minutes that he had nothing to contribute to their world. No vacation homes, no boats, no opinions on the best spots in Door County. "What do you do?" one of the men had asked politely. "I work at Lakeshore Books," Ethan said. "The independent bookstore on Clark Street." "Oh, how nice," the man's wife had replied with the particular enthusiasm people use when they're being kind about something they consider quaint. "We love supporting local businesses. We must stop by sometime." They wouldn't. Ethan knew they wouldn't. They probably bought their books from Amazon like everyone else, if they read physical books at all. The conversation moved on. Ethan ate his salad, mixed greens with some kind of berry vinaigrette, and tried to look pleasantly occupied. He was good at this. The art of being present but unobtrusive. Years of single parenthood had taught him how to exist in adult spaces while being mentally somewhere else, always half listening for a phone call about Jamie, always calculating the next task, the next meal, the next small crisis. The main course arrived, chicken or beef. Except Ethan apparently got chicken by default since he hadn't RSVP'd in time to choose. The chicken was fine. Everything was fine. The couple to his left was now discussing their daughter's college applications. The couple to his right had moved on to golf. Ethan checked his phone under the table. No new messages. He pulled up his Photos app and scrolled through pictures of Jamie. Her 3rd birthday party last month, just the 2 of them and Mel eating grocery store cake in their tiny kitchen. Her first day of preschool, standing in her new shoes that had cost $50 and would probably be too small in 3 months. Her asleep on his chest on the couch, both of them having passed out during a cartoon marathon. "She's beautiful." Ethan looked up, startled. One of the women at the table, he'd already forgotten her name, was smiling at him. "My daughter," he explained, feeling his face heat up. "Jamie? She's 3. "Oh, how sweet. Is your wife here tonight?" There it was, the question. He'd been waiting for it. "No wife," he said, keeping his voice neutral. "Just me and Jamie." The woman's expression shifted through several emotions quickly. Surprise, sympathy, curiosity, she was too polite to voice. "Well, she's lovely. You're doing a wonderful job." "Thanks." The woman returned to her own conversation, and Ethan put his phone away. He'd learned that single fathers occupied a strange space in social situations. People either treated you like a hero for doing the basic work of parenting, or they got uncomfortable, not sure whether to ask questions or politely ignore the elephant in the room. Where was Jamie's mother? The answer: Angela left when Jamie was 4 months old, and no, Ethan didn't know where she was or if she was coming back. Wasn't cocktail party conversation. It wasn't wedding dinner conversation either. So he'd gotten good at the short version, just me and Jamie. Let people fill in the blanks however they wanted. The toast started during dessert. Rachel's father told a rambling story about teaching her to ride a bike. Marcus's best man made jokes about their college days that landed with about 50% accuracy. Rachel herself gave a short speech thanking everyone for coming, her voice breaking a little when she mentioned her grandmother, who'd passed away the year before. Ethan felt the loneliness settle over him like a familiar coat. It wasn't the sharp, angry loneliness of the early days after Angela left. This was different, a dull, persistent ache that he'd learned to carry. He was surrounded by 200 people celebrating love and connection, and he had never felt more alone. The DJ started up after the toasts. The lights dimmed, the dance floor filled with couples, older ones swaying to something slow, younger ones waiting impatiently for the tempo to pick up. At table 17, the two couples excused themselves to join the dancing. Ethan was left alone with 5 empty chairs and a half-eaten piece of chocolate cake he couldn't quite finish. He should leave. He'd made an appearance. He'd watched Rachel get married. He'd eaten his chicken. There was no reason to stay. But something kept him in his chair. Maybe the fact that leaving meant going back to his empty apartment and lying awake wondering why he'd spent money he didn't have to feel invisible in a room full of people. At least here, the music was nice. At least here, he could pretend for a while longer that he was part of something. "Excuse me." Ethan looked up. A woman stood beside table 17, holding a champagne flute and wearing an expression of mild amusement. She was maybe 30, dressed in a black dress that was elegant without trying too hard. Her dark hair pulled back in a simple style. Pretty, but not in the obvious way of the other women in the room. There was something understated about her, something careful. "Is anyone sitting here?" she asked, gesturing to the empty chairs. "Oh, no, go ahead. They're all dancing." Ethan moved his water glass to make room, though she wasn't sitting anywhere near him. But instead of taking one of the closer chairs, she sat directly across from him, set down her champagne glass, smiled. "I'm hiding," she said conspiratorially. "Is that okay?" Ethan blinked. "Hiding from what?" "Small talk, networking, people who want to pitch me things or ask me for favors or tell me about their startup ideas." She took a sip of champagne. "It's exhausting. You looked like someone who might let me sit quietly without expecting conversation." "I can do that," Ethan said. They sat in silence for a moment. It wasn't awkward exactly, but Ethan felt suddenly self-conscious. The woman, whoever she was, seemed perfectly comfortable. She watched the dance floor with the detached interest of someone observing a mildly entertaining show. "I'm Victoria," she said finally, extending her hand across the table. "Ethan." He shook her hand, noting that her grip was firm, professional. "Are you friends with Rachel or Marcus?" "Marcus? We went to business school together. Well, I say together, but I barely attended classes. I was already running my company by then, so it was mostly just for the networking." She said it matter-of-factly, without bragging. "You?" "Rachel. We went to undergrad together. Haven't seen her much since." He stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence honestly. "Since my life fell apart. Since I became someone she had to invite out of obligation. Since life got busy," Victoria finished for him. "It happens." "Yeah." The DJ transitioned into something upbeat. More people flooded the dance floor, laughing and moving with the loose coordination of people who'd been taking full advantage of the open bar. Ethan watched them and felt the familiar tightness in his chest. Not quite anxiety, not quite sadness, just that persistent sense of being on the outside looking in. "You're not dancing," Victoria observed. "Neither are you." "I don't dance at weddings," she said. "People take pictures, And then I spend the next week seeing those pictures show up in tabloids with headlines about who I was dancing with and what it means. Ethan laughed, thinking she was joking, but her expression didn't change. That must be annoying, he said, still not entirely sure if she was serious. It is. She studied him for a moment, her head tilted slightly. You have no idea who I am, do you? Should I? No, she said, and for the first time she smiled genuinely. No, this is perfect. What do you do, Ethan? I work at a bookstore, Lakeshore Books, on Clark Street. I know that place, Victoria said, and she sounded sincere. The one with the green awning? I used to go there when I was in college. They have that whole section of first editions. That's the one. Though the first editions are in pretty rough shape now. Mr. Chen, he's the owner, keeps saying he's going to reorganize, but he's been saying that for 10 years. Do you like it, the work? It was such a simple question, but nobody had asked Ethan that in longer than he could remember. Did he like his job? The honest answer was complicated. He loved books, loved the smell of them and the weight of them, and the conversations they started with customers who actually cared about reading. He liked Mr. Chen, who paid him as much as the store could afford and pretended not to notice when Ethan showed up late because of Jamie's preschool schedule. But did he like standing behind a register for 40 hours a week, watching other people buy books he couldn't afford, knowing this was probably as far as his life was going to go? Sometimes, he said, I like the quiet, the customers who know what they want and the ones who need help finding it. I like that it's not corporate, you know? It feels real. Victoria nodded. Real is underrated. What do you do? Ethan asked, because it seemed polite to reciprocate. I run a company, she said vaguely. Investments, mostly. It's boring. Can't be that boring if tabloids care about who you dance with. She laughed, a real laugh that made her eyes crinkle at the corners. Okay, it's not boring. It's complicated and stressful, and sometimes I hate it, but mostly I like it because I'm good at it. She paused. Is that obnoxious to say? No, Ethan said. It's honest. They talked for a while after that. Not about anything important, just the kind of wandering conversation that happens between strangers who don't expect to see each other again. Victoria asked about the bookstore, and Ethan found himself telling her about Mrs. Patterson, the 80-year-old regular who came in every Tuesday to buy romance novels, and always asked if he'd read them first so he could recommend the good ones. He told her about the college student who'd special ordered a book on marine biology and then cried when it came in because it was the last thing her grandfather had recommended before he died. You care about them, Victoria said. Your customers. I guess so. They're more interesting than the books sometimes. That's the right way to run a bookstore, she said, or anything really, care about the people more than the product. Ethan wanted to ask what company she ran, what kind of investments, but before he could, one of the men from his table reappeared, slightly drunk and grinning. Ethan, you're missing the dancing. They're playing Motown, man. You gotta... He stopped when he noticed Victoria. His expression changed instantly, the easy drunkenness replaced by something sharper. Recognition. Oh, he said. Ms. Hale, I didn't realize you were... I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. You're not interrupting, Victoria said smoothly. We're just talking. The man looked between them, clearly confused about what someone like Victoria Hale was doing at table 17 with someone like Ethan. But he recovered quickly, nodding too much. Right, of course. Great. Yeah. He practically backed away toward the dance floor. Ethan stared at Victoria. Okay. Who are you actually? She sighed. I was hoping to avoid this for a little longer. Victoria Hale, Ethan said slowly, the name finally clicking into place. He didn't follow business news closely, but even he'd seen the articles. Youngest female billionaire in the country. Some kind of tech investment genius who'd turned a startup idea into an empire before she was 25. She'd been on magazine covers, given TED Talks, probably had a Wikipedia page longer than most novels. You're Victoria Hale. Guilty. And you're sitting at table 17. Apparently. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his brain trying to recalibrate everything about the last 20 minutes. Why? Because I wanted to, Victoria said simply. Because I saw you sitting here alone, and you looked like the only person in this entire ballroom who wasn't trying to impress anyone. Because I'm tired of conversations that are really just business pitches in disguise. She met his eyes. Because you treated me like a person, not a net worth. I didn't know your net worth. Exactly. She smiled. Can we just keep talking? Please. Pretend you still don't know who I am. Pretend I'm just someone who also thinks weddings are better when you're sitting down. Ethan should have felt intimidated. He should have made an excuse and left, because this was so far outside his normal reality that he couldn't even process it. But Victoria was looking at him with something close to hopefulness, and he realized she was serious. She actually wanted to keep talking to him. Okay, he said. Yeah, we can do that. Her smile widened. Thank you. They fell back into conversation, and Ethan tried to forget that he was talking to someone who probably made more money in a day than he'd earned in his entire life. It was surprisingly easy. Victoria asked about Jamie, whether being a single dad was as hard as people said it was. Harder, Ethan admitted. But also better, somehow. Like, everything is more intense. The good stuff is better than I thought possible, and the hard stuff is worse than I could have imagined. That sounds exhausting. It is, he hesitated, but I wouldn't trade it. Even on the days when I want to just disappear for a while, I wouldn't trade her for anything. Victoria studied him with an expression he couldn't quite read. You're a good father. I'm trying to be. That's the same thing. The DJ slowed things down again, and the dance floor cleared a bit as couples swayed to something classic and romantic. Ethan saw Rachel and Marcus in the middle of it all, holding each other close, lost in their own world. He felt the familiar pang of loneliness, but it was softer now, less sharp. Did you ever want kids? He asked Victoria, then immediately regretted it. Sorry, that's too personal. No, it's fine. She considered the question. I don't know. I never had time to think about it seriously. My company took up every minute from when I was 22 until now. And the men I've dated, she stopped, laughing a little. They either wanted to merge our businesses or they wanted me to stop working entirely. Nobody ever asked what I wanted. That sucks. It does. She looked at him curiously. Do you date? No time, Ethan said. Between Jamie and work, I barely sleep. And honestly, I wouldn't know how to explain my life to someone new. Hi, I'm Ethan. I'm broke. I'm a single dad. And most nights, I fall asleep on the couch during cartoons. Not exactly a winning profile. I think you're underestimating yourself. I think you're being nice. Victoria opened her mouth to respond, but she was interrupted by a sudden commotion near the head table. Rachel and Marcus were making their way through the ballroom, stopping at each table to thank people for coming. They were getting closer to table 17, and Ethan felt a flutter of nervousness. What would Rachel think, seeing him sitting here with Victoria Hale? Would she think he'd crashed some VIP section? Would she be embarrassed for him? But when Rachel and Marcus finally reached their table, something strange happened. Rachel saw Victoria first. Her eyes went wide, and she actually stopped walking for a moment, her hand flying to her mouth. Marcus noticed a second later, and his expression went through a similar transformation, shock, followed by something close to awe. Ms. Hale, Rachel said, her voice suddenly formal, in a way Ethan had never heard it. We didn't realize you'd be here. Marcus mentioned you might not be able to make it. I cleared my schedule, Victoria said warmly. I wouldn't miss it. Congratulations, both of you. Marcus was practically vibrating with nervous energy. Thank you so much for coming, and for your gift. It was incredibly generous. We don't know what to say. Victoria waved it off. It's nothing. I'm happy for you both. Rachel seemed to remember Ethan existed. She looked at him, then at Victoria, then back at him, clearly trying to understand what was happening. Ethan, I'm so glad you made it. Do you two know each other? We just met tonight, Victoria said before Ethan could answer. Ethan's been keeping me company. I hope you don't mind that I crashed his table. No, of course not. Rachel's brain was clearly malfunctioning. That's great. Ethan, I didn't know you knew. I didn't, Ethan said quickly. We just started talking. Marcus looked like he wanted to say something else, but a wedding coordinator was waving at them from across the room. Rachel touched his arm, reluctant to leave but aware they needed to keep moving. We have more tables to visit, but please, both of you, enjoy the rest of the night. And Ms. Hale, thank you again for everything. They moved on, and Ethan could see them whispering intensely to each other as they walked away. Around table 17, people were starting to notice. Other guests were glancing over, doing double takes when they recognized Victoria. The invisible corner of the ballroom was suddenly very visible. "I think I ruined your hiding spot," Ethan said. "Worth it," Victoria replied, but the spell was broken. Within minutes, people started approaching the table, casually at first, then more boldly. Someone wanted to introduce himself, just quickly. Someone else wanted to thank Victoria for speaking at their conference last year. A man in an expensive suit launched into a pitch about blockchain technology before Victoria politely but firmly cut him off. Ethan watched it happen, the way people's entire demeanor changed around her. They became smaller versions of themselves, trying too hard, performing. The same people who'd looked through him earlier were now desperate for her attention, and Victoria handled it all with practiced grace, but he could see the tiredness in her eyes. Finally, during a brief break in the onslaught, she turned to him. "I'm sorry about this." "Don't be. This is your normal, right?" "Unfortunately." She glanced at her watch, something elegant and probably worth more than Ethan's car. "I should probably go. Early morning tomorrow. Conference call with Tokyo." "On a Sunday?" "Business doesn't sleep." They stood up at the same time. For a moment, they just looked at each other. And Ethan felt something he couldn't name, not attraction exactly, though. She was beautiful, more like recognition, like they'd both been pretending to be fine all night, and they'd accidentally let each other see through it. "Thank you for this," Victoria said. "For treating me like a normal person." "You are a normal person," Ethan said. "You just happen to have a lot of money." She laughed. "That's the nicest thing anyone said to me in months." She reached into her small clutch and pulled out a business card, then hesitated. "This is going to sound weird, but can I give you my number?" "Why?" "Because I like talking to you, because you're honest, because—" She stopped, seeming to reconsider. "You don't have to call, but if you ever want to talk books or single parenthood or anything that isn't business, I'd like that." Ethan took the card. It was simple, expensive paper with just her name and a phone number, no company, no title. "Okay." "Okay." She smiled one more time, then turned to leave, navigating through the crowd that parted for her like water. Ethan sat back down at table 17, alone again. He looked at the business card, then at the ballroom around him. The night had started with him feeling invisible and ended with a billionaire giving him her personal number. He had no idea what to do with that information. His phone buzzed. "Mel. Jamie's asking for you. Told her you'd be home soon. You good?" He typed back, "Heading out now." Ethan pocketed Victoria's business card, grabbed his coat from the chair, and made his way out of the ballroom. As he walked through the lobby and out into the cold November night, he found himself smiling. Not because of who Victoria was, but because for 3 hours someone had chosen to sit with him, had chosen to talk to him like he mattered. The valet brought his Honda around and Ethan tipped him $5 he couldn't afford. He drove home through empty Chicago streets, thinking about forgotten tables and the strange luck of being in the right place at the wrong time. Or maybe it was the wrong place at the right time. He couldn't tell anymore. When he got home, Jamie was asleep in the guest bed, curled up with her stuffed elephant. Mel was on the couch, scrolling through her phone. "How was it?" she asked. Ethan thought about how to answer that question honestly. How was it? Lonely? Strange? Surprising? Completely surreal? "It was good," he said finally. It was really good." Mel looked at him suspiciously. "You meet someone?" "Maybe. I don't know." He sat down next to her. "I'll tell you later. I'm exhausted." After Mel left, Ethan carried Jamie to her own bed, tucking her in carefully so she wouldn't wake up. He stood in her doorway for a moment, watching her breathe, and felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle back onto his shoulders. This was his life, this small apartment, this sleeping child, this paycheck-to-paycheck existence. Victoria Hale's world, ballrooms and business cards and conference calls with Tokyo, had nothing to do with him. But as he got ready for bed, he saw Victoria's business card on his dresser where he'd emptied his pockets. He picked it up, running his thumb over the embossed lettering. She'd said to call if he wanted to talk. Not about business, just to talk. Ethan put the card in his wallet, behind his driver's license where he wouldn't lose it. He probably wouldn't call. What would he even say? But knowing he could, knowing that for one strange night someone had seen him as worth sitting beside, that felt like something. He turned off the light and lay in bed, listening to the familiar sounds of his apartment. The radiator clanking. The couple upstairs walking around. Jamie's soft breathing from the next room. His life, exactly as it had been yesterday and would be tomorrow. Except now he had a business card in his wallet and a memory of a woman in a black dress asking him about books and fatherhood like his answers actually mattered. It wasn't much, but sometimes, Ethan thought as he drifted off to sleep, it's enough just to know you weren't invisible after all. The business card sat in Ethan's wallet for 6 days, growing more worn each time he checked to make sure it was still there. Monday morning, he'd pulled it out while waiting for his coffee to brew, staring at the phone number like it might rearrange itself into something less intimidating. Tuesday, he'd almost called during his lunch break at the bookstore, his thumb hovering over the digits before he chickened out and ordered a sandwich instead. Wednesday, Jamie had found his wallet on the coffee table and tried to eat the card, leaving tiny teeth marks along one edge before Ethan rescued it. By Thursday, he'd convinced himself the whole thing had been some kind of fever dream, a temporary glitch in the universe that had already corrected itself. Friday afternoon, his phone rang while he was reorganizing the poetry section. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Hello? Ethan? It's Victoria from the wedding. His heart did something complicated in his chest. Oh, hi. I was going to call you. Were you? She sounded amused, not accusatory. Because it's been almost a week, and I was starting to think you'd thrown away my card. No, I still have it. My daughter tried to eat it, but it survived. Victoria laughed, and the sound made Ethan relax slightly. How old did you say she was? 3. Everything goes in her mouth. Last week it was a crayon. The week before that, a button from the couch. Sounds terrifying. It is. Ethan glanced around the bookstore. Mr. Chen was at the register helping a customer, but he'd notice eventually if Ethan stayed on his phone too long. I'm at work right now. Is this a bad time? For me or for you? Both, probably. Then I'll be quick, Victoria said. I'm in Chicago until Sunday. I was wondering if you'd want to grab coffee tomorrow. Afternoon, maybe? I know you probably have your daughter on weekends, but I thought, I can do tomorrow, Ethan interrupted, surprised by his own eagerness. My sister can watch Jamie for a few hours. Where were you thinking? There's a place called Intelligentsia in the Loop. Do you know it? Ethan knew it. He'd walked past it 100 times, but never gone in because their coffee cost more than he usually spent on lunch. Yeah, I can find it. 2 o'clock? 2 o'clock, he confirmed. After they hung up, Ethan stood in the poetry section for a full minute, holding a copy of Mary Oliver and trying to understand what had just happened. Victoria Hale had called him, had asked to see him again. This wasn't business. She'd been clear about that at the wedding, so what was it? Mr. Chen appeared at the end of the aisle, his reading glasses perched on top of his head. You look confused. I am confused. Good. Confusion means something interesting is happening. The old man smiled. You taking tomorrow afternoon off? If that's okay, I can work Sunday instead. Sunday's fine. Go have coffee with whoever made you look like that. Like what? Like maybe the world isn't as small as you thought it was. Saturday morning arrived with the particular anxiety that comes from knowing you're about to do something you can't quite explain to yourself. Ethan spent too long picking out clothes. Not the wedding suit, that was too formal, but not his usual bookstore outfit of jeans and a worn sweater either. He settled on dark pants and a button-down shirt that Jamie immediately smeared with peanut butter during breakfast. No, she said firmly when he tried to wipe her hands. No, no, no. Yes, 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 Ethan countered, succeeding only in spreading the peanut butter across more of her fingers. Aunt Mel's coming over soon. You're going to play while Daddy goes out for a little bit. Where Daddy going? To meet a friend. What friend? A new friend. Jamie considered this, her face serious in the way only toddlers could manage. I come too? Not this time, Bug, but maybe another time. Why not this time? Because I have no idea what I'm doing and I don't want you to witness whatever awkward disaster this turns into, Ethan thought. Out loud, he said, because grown-ups need to have boring conversations sometimes. Oh. Jamie accepted this explanation and returned to systematically destroying her toast. Mel arrived at 1:30, took one look at Ethan, and grinned. You changed your shirt 3 times, didn't you? Twice? Who is she? It's not like that. It's always like that when you change your shirt twice. Mel dropped her bag on the couch. Does this mystery woman have a name? Ethan hesitated. If he said Victoria's full name, Mel would immediately Google her, and then this whole thing would become a production. Victoria, we met at the wedding. And she's in Chicago? Lives here, I think, or works here, I don't actually know. Mel studied him with the particular intensity of a younger sister who'd spent years learning to read her brother's evasions. You like her? I barely know her. That's not what I asked. The truth was, Ethan didn't know what he felt. Intrigued, definitely. Nervous, completely out of his depth, but like? That felt too simple for whatever this was. She's interesting, he said finally. She's different from anyone I've met before. Different good or different weird? Different good, I think. He checked his watch. I need to leave soon. There's leftover mac and cheese in the fridge for Jamie's lunch, and she'll probably want a nap around 3. I've watched her before, Ethan. I know the drill. Mel shooed him toward the door. Go, have fun. Try not to overthink everything. I never overthink everything. You're the most overthinking person I know. She wasn't wrong. Ethan spent the entire train ride downtown constructing and demolishing conversation scenarios in his head. What would they talk about? The wedding? Books? Would Victoria expect him to know things about business or politics, or whatever billionaires discussed over coffee? Should he offer to pay, even though he couldn't afford their cheapest drink? Would she think he was cheap if he didn't? By the time he reached intelligentsia, he'd worked himself into a state of mild panic. The coffee shop was exactly as intimidating as he'd feared. All exposed brick and industrial lighting, filled with people working on expensive laptops and discussing things that sounded important. Ethan felt immediately underdressed despite his clean shirt. Victoria was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of her. She'd dressed down from the wedding, jeans and a simple sweater, but somehow still looked put together in a way Ethan couldn't quite achieve. She waved when she saw him. I ordered for you, she said as he approached. I hope that's okay. I got you a cappuccino, but I can get something else if you don't like it. Cappuccino's great. Ethan sat down, acutely aware that she'd probably already paid. Thank you. You're welcome. She smiled, and some of Ethan's anxiety loosened. How's your daughter? Did she survive you leaving? She's with my sister. They're probably making a fort out of couch cushions right now and eating snacks I said she couldn't have. Sounds like a good afternoon. Better than mine will be. Victoria raised an eyebrow. That confident about our coffee date? This is a date? What is it? I don't know. Is it? She seemed genuinely curious rather than flirtatious. I haven't been on an actual date in about 3 years, so I'm not sure I'd recognize one. 3 years? Work, she said simply. And the men I meet through work are usually interested in what I can do for them professionally, not personally. It gets old. She took a sip of her coffee. What about you? You said you don't date. Can't really afford to, Ethan said, then immediately regretted how that sounded. I mean, time-wise, Jamie takes up most of my free time, and what's left goes to work or sleep or trying to keep the apartment from falling apart. You live alone? Just you and Jamie? Yeah. 2-bedroom place in Lincoln Park. Well, 2-bedroom is generous. The second room is basically a closet with a window, but it fits her bed and toy box. He paused. It's not much, but it's ours. Victoria nodded slowly, like she was filing away this information. You said at the wedding that you're a single dad. Can I ask what happened? You don't have to tell me if it's too personal. Ethan had prepared himself for this question, but it still hit differently coming from her. He wrapped his hands around the warm coffee cup, buying time. Jamie's mom left when she was 4 months old, just packed a bag one morning and said she couldn't do it anymore. Being a parent, being with me, all of it. I haven't heard from her since. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. He forced himself to look at Victoria. Some days I'm angry about it. Most days I'm just tired. But Jamie doesn't remember her, so at least there's that. She doesn't know what she's missing. Do you think her mom will come back? No. The certainty in his own voice surprised him. Angela wasn't cut out for this. She was honest about that, at least. She left because staying would have made her miserable, and miserable parents don't do anyone any good. That's generous of you. It's realistic. Ethan took his first sip of the cappuccino. It was, objectively, the best coffee he'd ever tasted. What about you? You said you haven't dated in 3 years. By choice or circumstance? Both. Victoria leaned back in her chair. I started my first company when I was 22. Sold it at 25 for more money than I knew what to do with. Started the next one at 26. Somewhere in there, I looked up and realized everyone I knew wanted something from me. Investment advice, job recommendations, introductions to other wealthy people. I became a means to an end. That sounds lonely. It is. She said it plainly, without self-pity. At the wedding, when you didn't know who I was, that was the first real conversation I'd had in months, maybe longer. Everyone else is performing, trying to impress me or use me, but you just talked to me like I was a person. You are a person. Thank you for noticing. They fell into easier conversation after that. Victoria asked about the bookstore, and Ethan found himself telling her things he rarely talked about. How he'd started working there right after Angela left, desperate for any job with flexible hours. How Mr. Chen had taken a chance on him despite his complete lack of retail experience. How the regular customers had become something like family, checking in on him and Jamie, bringing hand-me-down clothes and unsolicited parenting advice. Mrs. Patterson, the romance novel lady I told you about, she keeps trying to set me up with her granddaughter, Ethan said. Every week it's Emily just got divorced, or Emily loves books too, or Emily thinks single dads are attractive. Have you met Emily? Once she came into the store specifically to browse while I was working. She was perfectly nice. But it felt like an audition, like she was checking off boxes. Employed? Check. Good with kids? Check. Doesn't look like a serial killer? Check. He shook his head. I know that's probably unfair. Dating is inherently awkward, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being evaluated for a position I didn't apply for. Victoria laughed. I know exactly what you mean. I went on one date last year, set up by a well-meaning board member, and the guy spent the entire dinner talking about his startup and how much potential it had with the right investor backing. He actually brought a pitch deck to the restaurant. No. I wish I was joking. He had slides prepared on his iPad. Did you invest? I paid for dinner and left. They talked for 2 hours, their coffee long finished. The afternoon light shifted through the windows, and the cafe filled and emptied around them, but neither of them moved. Ethan learned that Victoria had grown up in Ohio, studied economics because she was good at math, and discovered she had a talent for seeing patterns in markets that other people missed. She'd made her first million betting against a tech company everyone else thought would succeed. I was 23, she said. Everyone told me I was wrong. My professors, my mentors, people with decades more experience. But I'd read their financial reports, really read them, and the numbers didn't add up. So I trusted my gut. What happened? The company collapsed 6 months later. I tripled my investment. She said it matter-of-factly. That's when I realized I could do this for real, not just as some academic exercise, but as a career. Do you ever get it wrong? All the time. Last year I lost $40 million on a clean energy startup that turned out to be mostly smoke and mirrors. She shrugged. You can't win them all. The trick is winning more than you lose. Ethan tried to imagine having $40 million to lose. It was like trying to picture the edge of the universe, technically possible but functionally incomprehensible. Does it bother you, losing that much? Less than it probably should, Victoria admitted. I know that sounds awful, but when you have enough money that losing millions doesn't change your daily life. She stopped, looking uncomfortable. I'm not explaining this well. No, I get it. The numbers stop meaning the same thing. Exactly. She looked relieved. Most people either act like I'm a monster for saying that, or they start asking for investment advice. I don't want your advice, Ethan said. I barely understand my 401k. You have a 401k? Technically, it has about $1,200 in it. Victoria's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, frowned, and declined the call. Sorry, my assistant. She's supposed to have weekends off, but she worries. About what? About me disappearing for hours without telling anyone where I am. Victoria's expression was rueful. I have a security team. Not here, obviously. I made them stay at my hotel, but they track my location. It's part of the deal when you're worth enough that kidnapping becomes a legitimate concern. Ethan blinked. That's actually a thing you worry about? Not constantly, but yes, it's a thing. She saw his expression and smiled sadly. This is the part where it gets weird, right? Where you remember that my life isn't normal? I mean, it's okay. I know how it sounds. She stood up, gathering her coat. Should we walk? I'm not ready for this to end yet, but sitting is making me restless. They left the coffee shop and started walking with no particular destination. The afternoon had turned cold, the kind of Chicago November cold that cut through jackets and made you question all your life choices. But neither of them suggested stopping. "Tell me about Jamie," Victoria said as they walked. "What's she like?" Ethan felt the familiar warmth that always came when someone asked about his daughter. "She's stubborn, fearless. She climbs everything: furniture, playground equipment, people if they're sitting down. She has this laugh that's completely out of proportion to her size, and she asks why about everything, which is exhausting, but also kind of amazing. She sounds wonderful." "She is." Ethan hesitated. "She's also exhausting and messy, and sometimes I put on cartoons just so I can sit in silence for 20 minutes. I don't know if that makes me a bad parent. It makes you human." They turned onto Michigan Avenue, joining the flow of Saturday shoppers and tourists. Ethan watched Victoria navigate the crowd and noticed something he'd missed before: the way people looked at her. Some with recognition, others with simple curiosity, a few with calculating interest. She seemed practiced at ignoring it, but he wondered what it was like to never be truly anonymous. "Do you ever wish you could just be normal?" he asked. "Every day." Victoria stopped in front of a bookstore window display. "But I wouldn't give up what I've built to get there. Does that make sense?" "Yeah, actually." She turned to look at him. "What would you wish for? If you could change one thing about your life?" Ethan thought about it. More money was the obvious answer, but it wasn't quite right. "Time," he said finally. "I'd wish for more time. Time to be a better dad, time to figure out what I actually want, time to not feel like I'm constantly choosing between things that all matter." "That's a good answer." "What would you wish for?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment, staring at the book display without seeming to see it. "Someone who wanted me for me," she said softly. "Not my money or my connections or what I could do for their career. Just me." The vulnerability in her voice caught Ethan off guard. This woman who commanded boardrooms and made million-dollar decisions sounded, in that moment, exactly as lonely as he felt most days. "I think that's what everyone wants," he said. "Maybe." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I should probably head back soon. I have a dinner thing tonight, fundraiser for some arts foundation. I'm giving a speech." "Do you like giving speeches?" "I'm good at it, which isn't the same thing." She checked her phone again. "My assistant sent 4 texts. She's probably convinced I've been kidnapped." They started walking back toward the coffee shop, their pace slower than necessary. Ethan knew he should say something, thank her for the coffee, suggest they do this again, ask for her number even though he already had it. But the words felt stuck somewhere between his brain and his mouth. Victoria stopped when they reached the corner near Intelligentsia. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you agree to meet me today?" "Because you asked." "That's not an answer." Ethan shoved his hands in his pockets, suddenly aware of how cold his fingers had gotten. "Because at the wedding, you made me feel like I mattered, like my thoughts and opinions were worth hearing, and I wanted to feel that again, I guess. Even if it's temporary." "What makes you think it's temporary?" "Because our lives don't overlap, Victoria. You have galas and fundraisers and conference calls with Tokyo. I have a 3-year-old who needs help wiping her butt, and a job that pays barely enough to cover rent. This," he gestured between them, "whatever this is, it doesn't make sense." "Maybe it doesn't have to make sense," Victoria said. "Maybe we can just be 2 people who like talking to each other." "Can we? Really?" She didn't answer right away. A group of tourists pushed past them, laughing about something on someone's phone. Across the street, a man was selling flowers from a cart, calling out prices that would empty Ethan's wallet. The city moved around them, indifferent to whatever decision was happening on this corner. "I don't know," Victoria said finally, "but I'd like to try." Ethan's phone buzzed. He pulled it out and saw a text from Mel. "Jamie's asking when you're coming home. All good, but wanted you to know." "I need to go," he said, showing Victoria the message. "My sister's probably reached her limit of toddler entertainment." "Of course." Victoria pulled out her own phone. "Can I call you again, or is that too complicated?" "You can call me." The words came out before Ethan could second-guess them. "I want you to call me." "Okay." Her smile was genuine this time, reaching her eyes. "Thank you for today." for coffee and walking and not treating me like a business opportunity. Thank you for the cappuccino. It was probably the best coffee I'll ever have. That's sad. Welcome to my life. Victoria laughed, and then, before Ethan could process what was happening, she leaned in and hugged him. It was brief, friendly, nothing more than what you might give an old friend. But Ethan felt it anyway, the warmth of another person choosing to close the distance. When she pulled back, her cheeks were slightly pink. Sorry, was that weird? No, it was nice. Good. She stepped away, adjusting her coat. Go home to your daughter. I'll talk to you soon. Ethan watched her walk away, her figure disappearing into the crowd of Michigan Avenue shoppers. He stood there longer than necessary, trying to understand what had just happened and what it meant, and whether he'd just made things in his life significantly more complicated. His phone buzzed again. Mel. Seriously, she's getting cranky. Where are you? He started toward the train station, already planning his route home, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying the afternoon like a movie he'd missed important details in the first time around. Victoria had called him, had bought him coffee, had asked to see him again. These were facts, undeniable. What they added up to remained unclear. The train was crowded with weekend travelers, families heading downtown, couples dressed for dinner, college students loud with pre-evening energy. Ethan found a seat near the window and watched the city slide past. His reflection stared back at him, and he wondered what Victoria saw when she looked at him. Not his bank account, or his connections, or his potential usefulness. Just him. It was a strange feeling being seen. When he got home, Jamie launched herself at his legs before he'd fully closed the door. Daddy! Daddy back! Hey, Bug! He scooped her up, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo mixed with whatever snacks Mel had given her. Did you have fun with Aunt Mel? We made a fort. I see that. The living room was indeed dominated by a blanket structure held up by couch cushions and what looked like his entire collection of hardcover books. Mel emerged from the kitchen, looking tired but amused. She's been asking for you every 10 minutes for the last hour. How was coffee? Good. It was good. That's it? That's all I get? Ethan set Jamie down and watched her immediately climb back into the blanket fort. We talked. We walked around. She's interesting. You already said that. I know. Mel studied him with narrowed eyes. You're being weird about this. I'm processing. Process faster and give me details. But Ethan didn't know how to explain it in a way that would make sense to Mel or anyone else, including himself. How did you explain that sitting in an overpriced coffee shop with someone you barely knew had felt more real than most of his daily life? How did you articulate the specific loneliness of being a single parent and the unexpected relief of talking to another adult who seemed to actually care about your answers? She wants to see me again, he said instead. And I said yes. Good. Mel grabbed her coat from the back of the couch. You deserve something good, Ethan, even if it's just coffee with an interesting woman. After Mel left, Ethan made dinner, chicken nuggets and apple slices, Jamie's current favorite meal, and tried to focus on his daughter's running commentary about her afternoon. But his mind kept drifting back to Victoria, to the things she'd said and the things she hadn't, to the hug that had felt like someone reaching across an impossible distance to say, I see you. That night, after Jamie was asleep, Ethan's phone rang. Unknown number again, but he knew before answering. Hi, Victoria said. Is this too late? I realized I never asked what time Jamie goes to bed. 7:30, usually, but I'm still up. Good. He heard noise in the background, music, voices, the sound of a party in full swing. I'm at this fundraiser and I'm hiding in a hallway. Everyone keeps asking me about market predictions and I'm so bored I might actually die. Ethan smiled, alone in his dim living room. You could leave. I gave a $50,000 donation. They'd notice if I left. $50,000. It's for a good cause. Arts education for underprivileged kids. She paused. I had a good time today. Me too. I want to see you again. Is that okay? I know you're busy with Jamie and work, but maybe we could figure something out. Ethan thought about all the reasons this was a bad idea. The complications, the differences between their lives, the inevitable moment when she'd realize he had nothing to offer her. But sitting in his quiet apartment, listening to her voice cut through the background noise of her expensive party, None of those reasons felt as important as they should. Yeah, he said, I'd like that. Okay. He could hear the smile in her voice. I'll call you tomorrow. We'll figure out the details. After they hung up, Ethan sat in the dark for a while, turning his phone over in his hands. Through the wall, he could hear his neighbor's television, the muffled laugh track of some sitcom. Outside, traffic moved past on the street below. His life, exactly as it had been this morning. Except now there was Victoria's voice on his phone and the possibility of something he couldn't quite name hanging in the air like a question waiting to be answered. He checked on Jamie one more time before bed. She was sprawled across her mattress in the boneless way only small children could manage, her stuffed elephant clutched to her chest. This was his priority, his purpose, his reason for getting up every morning. Nothing could change that. But maybe, Ethan thought, as he finally climbed into his own bed, maybe there was room for something else, too. Something just for him. He wasn't sure what it would look like or how it would work or whether it would last longer than a few weeks of coffee dates and phone calls. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, he wanted to find out. The calls became a pattern over the next 2 weeks, arriving at odd hours when Victoria found pockets of time between meetings or flights. Tuesday at 11 p.m., she called from a hotel in Boston, unable to sleep. Thursday morning at 6:30, she caught Ethan making breakfast while Jamie demanded pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. Saturday afternoon, both of them free for once, they talked for nearly 3 hours about nothing in particular. Books they'd read, movies they'd meant to see, the weird social rituals of weddings. I got another invitation yesterday, Victoria said during that Saturday call. Some tech CEO's daughter getting married in the Hamptons. They sent it to my office with a handwritten note about how much my presence would mean. Translation, they want you to bring a big check. Exactly, but she sighed. I'll send a gift and make up an excuse. I've been to enough weddings where I'm just a photo opportunity. Ethan was folding laundry on his bed, the phone on speaker while Jamie built a tower out of blocks in the corner. The Montgomery wedding was different though, right? You actually knew Marcus. I did. Still do technically, though we haven't talked much since graduation. That's the thing about my life. I know a lot of people, but I don't really know many people anymore. Does that make sense? Yeah, it does. What about you? Do you have friends? Real ones, not just work people or parent acquaintances? Ethan thought about it. I used to. Before Jamie, I had a whole group from college. We'd meet up for basketball, grab beers, do the normal 20-something stuff. But after Angela left and I had Jamie full-time, it got harder. They didn't know what to do with me anymore. I wasn't just Ethan. I was Ethan plus baby, and that changed things. They couldn't handle it? They tried, but their lives kept moving forward and mine just stopped. They were getting promotions, taking trips, dating. I was learning how to change diapers and function on 3 hours of sleep. We didn't have much in common anymore. Victoria was quiet for a moment. That must have been hard. It was. Still is sometimes. Ethan matched up a pair of Jamie's tiny socks. But I've got Mel, and Mr. Chen at the bookstore is good to talk to, and now I've got you, I guess, if that's allowed. It's allowed. Her voice was warm. I like being someone you can talk to. The following Wednesday, Victoria texted him mid-afternoon. Free tonight? Ethan was shelving returns when the message came through. He read it 3 times, his heart doing something complicated. Free was relative. Mel had plans. His usual backup babysitter was out of town, but standing in the bookstore, surrounded by other people's stories, he found himself typing back, "Let me figure something out." Mr. Chen appeared at the end of the aisle, somehow always knowing when Ethan needed something. You need tonight off? I might. Is that okay? I know it's short notice. It's fine, we're not busy. The old man's eyes crinkled. This is the interesting woman again. Yeah. Then go. Life doesn't wait for convenient scheduling. Ethan called Mel, who listened to his awkward request and immediately said no. I have a date, Ethan. An actual date with someone who's not my nephew. Right, sorry, I shouldn't have asked. But, she drew out the word, I can cancel if this is important. No, don't cancel. It's fine. Is it the woman from the wedding? Ethan hesitated. Maybe. The one you've been weirdly secretive about for 2 weeks? I haven't been secretive. You've been extremely secretive. You get this look on your face when your phone rings and you won't tell me her name. Mel paused. This is important to you. I don't know what it is yet. That's not what I asked. Another pause. I'll cancel. Mike will understand. Well, he probably won't, but I'll deal with it. Mel, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. You deserve something good, Ethan, even if you're being weird and secretive about it. After they worked out the details, Ethan texted Victoria back. I'm free. What did you have in mind? Her response came immediately. Dinner? Somewhere quiet? I'll pick you up at 7. You don't need to pick me up. I want to. Send me your address. Ethan stared at his phone, imagining Victoria pulling up to his rundown apartment building with its broken intercom and questionable heating. But before he could suggest meeting somewhere else, another text arrived. Please? I promise not to judge your apartment. How did you know I was worried about that? Because I'm not an idiot. Address? He sent it. Mel arrived at 6:30, taking one look at Ethan's outfit and shaking her head. You look like you're going to a job interview. What's wrong with it? Nothing's wrong, it's just too formal. You're going to dinner, not meeting with a loan officer. She pushed past him into the apartment. Where's Jamie? Living room. I already fed her. Then go change, jeans and a sweater. Something that looks like you actually want to be there, not like you're fulfilling an obligation. Ethan changed while Mel entertained Jamie with some game involving hiding her elephant and finding it in increasingly obvious places. When he emerged in dark jeans and a gray sweater that didn't look too worn, Mel gave him an approving nod. Better? You look human now. I looked human before. You look nervous. There's a difference. She glanced at her watch. What time is she coming? 7. And you still won't tell me who she is? It's complicated. Everything with you is complicated. Mel settled onto the couch, pulling Jamie into her lap. Go. Have fun. Try not to overthink this into oblivion. At exactly 7 p.m., Ethan's phone buzzed. I'm outside. He looked out the window and saw a black car idling at the curb. Not a limo. Victoria had apparently shown some restraint, but definitely not a regular car either. Something sleek and expensive that made his Honda look even more pathetic by comparison. That's her car? Mel had appeared beside him at the window. I guess so. Jesus, Ethan, who is this woman? I'll tell you later. He grabbed his coat. Jamie, be good for Aunt Mel, okay? Okay, Daddy. Jamie didn't look up from her elephant game. Ethan made it down the 3 flights of stairs and out onto the sidewalk before his nerves caught up with him. The car's back door opened and Victoria leaned out. Are you getting in or inspecting the vehicle? Getting in. Sorry. He slid into the seat beside her, immediately aware of how nice everything was. Leather seats, climate control, the faint smell of expensive perfume. Victoria smiled at him, and some of his anxiety dissolved. She was dressed casually again, jeans and a dark sweater, but somehow made it look intentional rather than thrown together. Hi. Hi. You look nice. My sister made me change. Apparently I looked too much like I was going to a job interview. I would have been fine with the job interview look. She leaned forward to speak to the driver. Nico, we're good to go. The car pulled smoothly away from the curb. Ethan watched his building disappear in the side mirror, feeling like he'd just crossed into some alternate dimension where he was the kind of person who got picked up in nice cars for mysterious dinner plans. Where are we going? He asked. A place in River North. It's quiet, the food is good, and the owner owes me a favor, so we'll have privacy. Privacy from what? Photographers. Other diners who might recognize me and want to chat. She saw his expression. I know it sounds paranoid, but trust me. Last time I went to a normal restaurant, someone posted a photo on Instagram, and by the next morning there were 3 articles speculating about who I was having dinner with and whether it meant I was investing in their company. That's insane. That's my life. She shifted to face him more directly. Is this too much? The car? The private table? I can tell the driver to take us somewhere more normal. Ethan considered lying, saying it was fine, playing along like this was all perfectly natural. But something about Victoria made him want to be honest. It's a lot. I'm not used to any of this. I know. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. I'm trying to understand what's happening here. You and me both. The restaurant was tucked into a side street, unmarked except for a small brass number beside the door. They were led through a mostly empty dining room, deliberately empty, Ethan suspected, to a corner table that was somehow both visible and secluded. The lighting was low, candles on every table, the kind of place where you could hear yourself think. A waiter appeared immediately, rattling off specials in a French accent that might have been real. Victoria ordered wine without looking at the price list. Ethan tried not to think about how much this meal was probably going to cost. "So," Victoria said once they were alone, "how was your week?" "Jamie got kicked out of circle time at preschool for teaching the other kids to say poopy." Victoria laughed, the sound bright in the quiet restaurant. "She didn't. She absolutely did. Her teacher called me at work. Very serious conversation about appropriate language and setting boundaries." Ethan shook his head. "I tried to explain that 3-year-olds think poopy is the height of comedy, but I don't think Mrs. Henderson was convinced." "What did you tell Jamie?" "That we don't say poopy at school. We save it for home." "Excellent parenting. I'm doing my best." He took a sip of water, the glass heavy and crystalline. "What about you? How was your week?" "I fired someone on Monday, hired 3 people on Tuesday. Wednesday, I spent 8 hours in meetings trying to convince a board that we should invest in a company they thought was too risky. Thursday, I flew to San Francisco and back in the same day for a lunch meeting that could have been an email. Friday, I realized I hadn't eaten a real meal since Sunday and ordered Thai food at midnight. That sounds exhausting. It is. She leaned back as the waiter delivered their wine. But it's also what I signed up for. I like the work, even when I hate it. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's how I feel about being a dad sometimes. They ordered food. Ethan let Victoria guide him through the menu since everything was in French and he was completely lost. When the waiter left, she asked about the bookstore, about Mr. Chen, about whether Ethan had ever thought about doing something else. "Sometimes," he admitted. "I mean, I like the bookstore, but it's not exactly a career. Mr. Chen can barely afford to pay me what he does. There's no room for advancement or raises or any of the normal job stuff." "What would you do if you could do anything?" "I don't know. I used to think I'd write books instead of just selling them. That was the plan in college. Get a journalism degree, write the great American novel, live in a tiny apartment and suffer for my art." "What happened?" "Life happened. Angela got pregnant our senior year. We weren't planning it, obviously, but we decided to keep the baby. I dropped out to work full-time, thinking I'd go back and finish my degree later. Then Angela left, and later turned into never." Victoria watched him carefully. "Do you resent her for that? For derailing your plans?" Ethan had been asked this question before, usually by well-meaning people who wanted him to admit to anger he didn't really feel. "No. I resent the situation sometimes. I resent being broke and tired and watching my friends live the lives I thought I'd have. But Jamie isn't a mistake. She's the best thing that ever happened to me, even if the timing was terrible." "You're a better person than I am." "I doubt that. No, I'm serious." Victoria leaned forward. "If someone had derailed my plans at 22, I don't know if I could be that gracious about it." "You don't know what you do until you're in it," Ethan said. "Before Jamie, I probably would have said the same thing. But when you're holding this tiny person who depends on you for everything, all the other stuff just becomes less important." Their food arrived, and they ate while Victoria told him about the company she was trying to convince her board to invest in. It was something about renewable energy storage, batteries that could revolutionize how power grids worked. Ethan understood maybe half of the technical details, but he loved watching her talk about it, the way her eyes lit up when she explained the potential, the way her hands moved to emphasize points. "You really care about this," he observed. "I do. It's not just about making money, though that's part of it. It's about backing things that could actually matter, change the world in some small way." "That's not small, that's kind of everything." Victoria smiled. "You get it. Most people hear investment firm and think I'm just shuffling money around to make more money. And sure, some of it is that. But the projects I'm most excited about are the ones that could actually make a difference. Like renewable energy batteries." "Exactly." She took a sip of wine. "What about you? If you could change one thing about the world, what would it be?" Ethan thought about it while finishing his meal, some kind of fish that was probably delicious, but he was too nervous to fully appreciate. "I'd want everyone to have enough. Not wealth, necessarily, but enough food, enough housing, enough safety, that they're not constantly worried about surviving." I see people come into the bookstore who clearly can't afford books, but they buy them anyway because they need an escape. And I wish I could just give them what they need without them having to choose between escape and groceries. That's a good answer. It's not realistic. Most good answers aren't. Victoria set down her fork. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you say yes to tonight, to any of this? She gestured between them. I know I asked first, but you could have said no. You could have made excuses or ignored my calls. Why didn't you? Ethan had known this question was coming eventually. He'd been preparing answers in his head for days, trying out different versions of the truth. But sitting across from Victoria in this quiet restaurant, pretending felt pointless. Because I'm lonely, he said simply. Not all the time. I have Jamie and Mel and work. But there's this specific kind of lonely that comes from being the only adult in your own life. And when you called, when you asked to see me again, it felt like someone was actually interested in me as a person, not as Jamie's dad or the guy who works at the bookstore. Just me. Victoria nodded slowly. I understand that. Why did you call? You could date anyone. Successful people, interesting people, people who could actually afford to take you to nice restaurants instead of the other way around. Because most of those people bore me, she said bluntly. They want to talk about markets and trends and who's investing in what, or they want to impress me with their accomplishments or their connections. And I'm so tired of being seen as Victoria Hale, billionaire investor, instead of just Victoria, person. Is there a difference? There should be. She met his eyes. With you, there is. You don't care what I'm worth or who I know. You care about whether I've had actual meals this week and whether I'm happy. When's the last time someone asked me that? Whether you're happy? Yeah. Are you? Victoria considered the question seriously. Sometimes, when I close a good deal or back a company that succeeds, when I'm working on something that matters. But mostly I'm just busy. Happiness feels like something other people have time for. That's sad. I know. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Your turn. Are you happy? Sometimes. When Jamie does something funny or sweet. When I sell a book to someone who's genuinely excited about it. When I have 10 minutes to myself and don't feel guilty about it. He paused. And sometimes when I'm talking to you? The admission hung between them, more honest than Ethan had intended. Victoria's expression softened. Sometimes when I'm talking to you too, she said quietly. They sat in that moment, the restaurant noise fading to background static. Ethan felt like they were standing at the edge of something, some decision point where they either acknowledged what was happening between them or pretended it wasn't real. Before either of them could speak, Ethan's phone rang. He pulled it out, saw Mel's name, and his stomach dropped. She wouldn't call unless something was wrong with Jamie. I need to take this, he said, already standing. Of course. He stepped away from the table, pressing the phone to his ear. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, Mel said quickly. Jamie's fine, but she woke up crying and she won't calm down unless she talks to you. I'm sorry. I know you're at dinner. Put her on. There was shuffling, and then Jamie's voice, thick with tears. Daddy? Hey, Bug, what's going on? I had a bad dream. What about? You didn't come back. Her voice cracked. You left like Mommy. Ethan's heart clenched. Jamie didn't usually remember Angela. How could she, when Angela had left before Jamie was old enough to form real memories? But sometimes the abandonment leaked through in other ways. Fear that Ethan would disappear too. I'm coming back, Bug. I promise. I'm just having dinner with a friend, and then I'll be home. Promise? I promise. Have I ever not come back? No. Then you know I always will. He softened his voice. Can you do something for me? Can you go back to bed and let Aunt Mel read you a story? And when you wake up in the morning, I'll be there to make pancakes. Dinosaur pancakes? Any shape you want. Okay, she sniffled. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, Bug. So much. Mel came back on the line. Sorry. I tried to handle it without calling, but no, it's fine. You did the right thing. Ethan rubbed his face. I should probably head home soon anyway. You don't have to rush. She's calming down already. I know, but I want to be there. He hung up and returned to the table where Victoria was waiting with a knowing expression. You need to go, she said. Not a question. Yeah, I'm sorry. Jamie woke up scared, and Ethan, you don't need to apologize. She's your daughter. She comes first. I know, but we were having a nice time, and we were. Victoria signaled for the check. And we can do it again. But right now, your kid needs you. That's not negotiable. The waiter brought the check in a leather folder. Ethan didn't even try to reach for it. He'd seen the prices on the menu and knew his credit card would probably catch fire if he attempted to pay. Victoria handed over a black card without looking at the total. They rode back to Ethan's apartment in comfortable silence, Victoria's hand somehow finding his in the space between them. It wasn't romantic exactly, more like an anchor, a reminder that this was real, that she understood. "Thank you for tonight," Ethan said as the car pulled up to his building. "We barely finished dinner." "Still, thank you for understanding about Jamie. Of course I understand. She's 3 and you're her whole world. I'd be worried if you didn't go to her." Victoria squeezed his hand. "Can I see you again?" "Yes. Definitely yes." "Good." She smiled. "Go. Be with your daughter." Ethan climbed out of the car and watched it pull away, Victoria's silhouette visible through the back window. Then he took the stairs 2 at a time, unlocked his apartment, and found Jamie curled up on the couch with Mel, half asleep against her aunt's shoulder. "Daddy!" Jamie scrambled down and ran to him, wrapping her arms around his legs. "Hey, Bug." He picked her up, feeling her weight settle against his chest. "You okay?" "Uh-huh." "You came back." "I always come back." He looked at Mel over Jamie's head. "Thanks for calling." "No problem." Mel gathered her things. "How was dinner before the interruption?" "Good. Really good." "You still not going to tell me who she is?" Ethan hesitated, then decided Mel had earned at least part of the truth. "Victoria Hale, like..." Mel stopped moving. "The Victoria Hale? The billionaire?" "That's the one." "How the hell did you meet..." "The wedding. That's why you've been so weird about it." She stared at him. "Ethan, what are you doing?" "I have no idea." "Does she know about your life? About how broke you are, and how complicated everything is with Jamie?" "She knows some of it, maybe not all of it." "And she still wants to see you?" "Apparently." Mel shook her head, somewhere between impressed and concerned. "Just be careful, okay? I don't want you getting hurt when she realizes how different your worlds are." "I know. I'm trying not to think about that part." After Mel left, Ethan carried Jamie to her bed, tucking her in with her elephant. She was already mostly asleep, her breathing evening out into the soft rhythm of childhood dreams. "Daddy?" she mumbled. "Yeah? Dinosaur pancakes tomorrow." "Dinosaur pancakes tomorrow." "Okay, love you." "Love you too, Bug." Ethan stood in her doorway for a long moment, watching her sleep and thinking about the phone call that would come tomorrow or the next day, Victoria's voice cutting through the ordinary chaos of his life. He didn't know where this was going or how it could possibly work. Their worlds didn't just not overlap. They existed in completely different dimensions. But standing there in his cheap apartment with his daughter asleep in the next room and the memory of Victoria's hand in his still warm on his skin, Ethan found he didn't care about logistics or practicality or the 100 reasons this didn't make sense. For the first time in 3 years, he felt like someone saw him, really saw him, and chose to stay anyway. That was worth something. Maybe it was worth everything. He checked his phone before bed and found a text from Victoria. "Is she okay?" "She's fine. Asleep now. Thank you for understanding." "Always." "Sleep well, Ethan." "You too." Ethan plugged in his phone and lay in bed, staring at his ceiling with its water stain from the upstairs neighbor's bathroom leak. Tomorrow he'd wake up and make dinosaur pancakes. He'd take Jamie to the park if the weather was decent. He'd go to work and shelve books and answer Mr. Chen's knowing questions. His life would continue exactly as it had been, except now there was a Victoria, existing in the margins of his days like a secret he wasn't quite ready to share with the world. And for now, that was enough. The dinosaur pancakes came out looking more like blobs with legs, but Jamie didn't seem to care. She sat at their small kitchen table, syrup covering her face and hands, chattering about a dream where elephants could fly. Ethan made coffee in the French press that never quite worked right and tried to focus on his daughter instead of checking his phone every 30 seconds. Victoria called at 9 just as he was wiping syrup off the wall. "Good morning," she said, and he could hear traffic in the background. How's Jamie? Currently wearing more breakfast than she ate, but she's happy. Ethan watched Jamie attempt to drink orange juice while simultaneously holding her elephant. Where are you? Heading to the office. I have back-to-back meetings until 3, then a call with London at 4. She paused. I'm already thinking about when I can see you again. Yeah? Is that weird? We've only actually spent a few hours together, and I'm acting like I don't know what I'm acting like. I've been checking my phone all morning hoping you'd call, Ethan admitted. So if you're weird, I'm weird too. Good. We can be weird together. Victoria's voice softened. I have an idea, but I need you to hear me out before you say no. That's a terrifying way to start. Next weekend. I have to fly to New York for meetings Friday, but I'll be back Saturday morning. There's this charity thing Saturday night. Gala, auction, the whole production. I need to go because I'm on the board, but I can bring a guest. She spoke faster, like she was afraid he'd interrupt. Come with me. We'll have dinner. You can see what my actual world looks like. And afterward, we can decide if this makes any sense at all. Ethan's mind immediately compiled a list of reasons this was a terrible idea. He didn't own formal wear beyond his wedding suit. He'd have to find someone to watch Jamie overnight. He'd be completely out of his element, surrounded by people who probably spent more on shoes than he made in a month. And what would Victoria's colleagues think when she showed up with a bookstore employee who could barely afford the train ticket downtown? Ethan, you still there? Yeah, I'm here. That's a big ask, Victoria. I know. And if you're not comfortable with it, I understand. But I want you there. Not as some statement or because I need a date for appearances. I want you there because I like being around you, and everything is easier when you're nearby. What about Jamie? I can't just leave her overnight. Bring her. To a charity gala? No, to the hotel. I'll book a suite with 2 rooms. Your sister can stay there with her, order room service, watch movies. Jamie gets a fun sleepover, you get a night out, everyone wins. Ethan looked at his daughter, who had abandoned breakfast in favor of building a fort under the table with her elephant. I don't have anything to wear to something like that. I'll take care of it. Just give me your measurements. Victoria, please? Her voice carried a vulnerability he hadn't heard before. I go to these things alone all the time. Everyone there wants something from me or wants to be seen with me for their own reasons. Just once, I'd like to have someone there who actually gives a shit about me as a person. That's what got him. Not the fancy hotel or the promise of a nice meal, but the quiet desperation in her voice. The same loneliness he carried around every day, just wrapped in expensive clothes and high-profile meetings. Okay, he said. I'll come. Really? Really, but I'm paying for Mel's room service. Deal. He could hear the smile in her voice. Thank you, Ethan. After they hung up, Ethan sat at the kitchen table and tried to process what he'd just agreed to. Jamie emerged from under the table, syrup somehow now in her hair. Who was that? She asked. A friend. The same friend from before? Yeah, the same one. Is she your girlfriend? Ethan blinked. Jamie had never asked about girlfriends before, had never seemed to notice or care that other kids had 2 parents while she only had 1. No, Bug, we're just friends. Oh. Jamie climbed into his lap, sticky hands and all. Can we go to the park? Sure. Let's get you cleaned up first. The following week crawled by with the specific torture of anticipating something you're both excited about and terrified of. Ethan gave Victoria his measurements via text, feeling absurd about the whole thing. She responded with a thumbs-up emoji and nothing else, which somehow made it worse. Wednesday afternoon, a package arrived at the bookstore. Mr. Chen called Ethan to the front, eyebrows raised at the expensive-looking box with Ethan's name on it. Should I be concerned? The old man asked. Probably. Inside was a tuxedo. Not a rental, not something cheap from a department store, but an actual custom-made tuxedo that fit him perfectly when he tried it on in the bookstore bathroom. There was a note tucked in the jacket pocket in Victoria's handwriting. You'll look good in this. See you Saturday. Sois vie. You're dating someone rich, Mr. Chen observed when Ethan emerged from the bathroom. I'm not dating anyone. Then why did someone send you a $1,000 suit? It's complicated. Everything with you is complicated. Mr. Chen smiled. But you look happy, stressed and confused, but happy. That's something. Convincing Mel to spend Saturday night in a hotel watching Jamie was surprisingly easy. Are you kidding? She said when Ethan called to ask. Free hotel, free food, and all I have to do is hang out with my favorite niece? That's not a favor. That's a vacation. There's a catch. There's always a catch with you. The hotel is really nice, like probably nicer than anywhere either of us have ever stayed, and it's because Victoria Hale is paying for it. Mel was quiet for a moment. You're really doing this. Actually dating a billionaire. I'm not dating her. We're just spending time together. Ethan, she bought you a custom tuxedo and booked a hotel suite. That's dating. It's complicated. Stop saying that. Mel sighed. Look, I'm happy you're putting yourself out there. I am. But I'm also worried. What happens when she gets bored? When the novelty of slumming it with a normal person wears off? I don't know. That's what scares me. You're all in on this and you don't even know what this is. Ethan couldn't argue because she was right. He'd spent the last 3 weeks in a strange liminal space between his regular life and whatever was happening with Victoria. Phone calls at odd hours, text messages that made him smile at inappropriate times, the constant low-level awareness that someone was thinking about him even when they weren't together. It felt good. It felt dangerous. Mostly it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff and being equally afraid of falling and of backing away. I know it doesn't make sense, he told Mel, but I need to see where this goes. Can you understand that? Yeah, she said quietly. Yeah, I can understand that. Saturday arrived cold and gray, typical Chicago December weather that threatened snow without delivering. Victoria had arranged for a car to pick them up at noon, Ethan, Jamie, and Mel, all three of them awkward and overdressed in the back of a vehicle that probably cost more than Ethan's annual salary. This is insane, Mel whispered, staring at the leather interior. This is actually insane. Tell me about it, Ethan muttered back. Jamie, oblivious to the weirdness, pressed her face against the window. Are we going to the castle? Sort of. A hotel. With a princess? I don't think so. Oh. Jamie sounded disappointed. The hotel was on Michigan Avenue, all glass and steel and the kind of quiet elegance that made Ethan feel like he was trespassing just by entering the lobby. The car pulled up to a side entrance where a man in a uniform immediately opened their door and welcomed them by name. Mr. Cole, we have you in suite 2847. Your luggage? Ethan held up the single duffel bag he'd brought for himself and Jamie. This is it? The man's expression didn't change, but Ethan caught the flicker of surprise. Rich people probably didn't show up with one duffel bag for a weekend stay. The suite was ridiculous. 2 bedrooms, a living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake, a bathroom bigger than Ethan's entire kitchen. Jamie ran from room to room, shrieking with delight, while Mel stood frozen in the entryway. I can't stay here, she said. You have to. You're watching Jamie. Ethan, this place costs more per night than I make in a week. I know. Try not to think about it. A knock at the door revealed a hotel employee with a rolling cart covered in children's activities, coloring books, puzzles, stuffed animals. Compliments of Ms. Hale, the woman said with a practiced smile. She wanted to make sure the young lady was entertained. After the woman left, Mel turned to Ethan. She thought of Jamie. She actually thought about what a 3-year-old would need. Yeah, she does that. Maybe I was wrong about her. You haven't even met her yet. I know, but anyone who thinks about what would make a toddler happy can't be all bad. Mel picked up one of the stuffed animals, a plush elephant that matched Jamie's favorite. Okay, I'm officially less worried and more curious. Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. How's the room? Jamie thinks she's in a castle. Mel is having an existential crisis about the thread count on the sheets. I'm trying to pretend this is normal. It's not normal, but I'm glad you're there. I'll pick you up at 7. Wear the tux. What else would I wear? Smart ass. See you tonight. The hours before 7 passed in a blur of helping Jamie settle in, making sure Mel knew where everything was, and trying not to spiral into panic about the evening ahead. He showered using hotel products that probably cost more than his usual shampoo, shaved carefully, and put on the tuxedo that fit him like it had been made for his body. Which, he supposed, it had been. You look good, Mel said when he emerged from the bedroom. She was on the couch with Jamie, both of them watching some cartoon about talking dogs. Like, really good. I've never seen you in a tux before. I've never owned a tux before. Well, you should. It works for you. At exactly 7, there was a knock. Ethan opened the door and forgot how to breathe. Victoria stood in the hallway wearing a midnight blue dress that somehow managed to be both elegant and understated. Her hair was up, her makeup subtle, and she looked so far out of Ethan's league that he momentarily forgot how to form words. "Hi," she said, her eyes traveling over him. "The tux fits. You look—" Ethan stopped, struggled, tried again. "You look beautiful." "Thank you." She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "You ready?" "No, but let's go anyway." Victoria stepped into the suite and immediately crouched down to Jamie's level. "You must be Jamie. I've heard a lot about you." Jamie stared at her with the unblinking intensity only toddlers could manage. "Are you the princess?" "I'm not a princess. I'm Victoria. I'm your dad's friend." "Oh." Jamie considered this. "You're pretty, like a princess." "Thank you. You're pretty like a princess, too." Victoria glanced at the stuffed elephant. "I see you found the elephant. Does it match your other one?" "Yeah. How did you know I have an elephant?" "Your dad told me. He tells me lots of things about you." Jamie beamed, then returned to her cartoon without further interest. Kids had short attention spans for adult conversations. Victoria straightened and turned to Mel. "You must be Mel. Thank you for doing this on short notice." "No problem. Thanks for the—" Mel gestured vaguely at the suite. "All of this." "You're welcome. Order whatever you want from room service. There's also a spa in the hotel if you want to book a treatment. Just put it on the room." She pulled a business card from her small clutch and handed it to Mel. "My cell number. If anything happens or Jamie needs Ethan, call immediately. We're only 20 minutes away." "Got it." Victoria turned back to Ethan. "Shall we?" The car ride to the gala venue felt surreal. They sat close enough that Ethan could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive, but far enough that they weren't touching. The city passed by outside, all lights and movement, and Ethan tried to calm his racing heart. "You okay?" Victoria asked. "Nervous." "Don't be. Most of these people are boring. Just smile, make small talk when necessary, and stay near me." "What if someone asks what I do?" "Tell them you work in books. If they push for details, tell them you're in independent retail. It's not a lie." "It's not the whole truth either." Victoria looked at him seriously. "Ethan, I don't care what anyone at this event thinks about you or your job or how much money you make. I invited you because I want you here. Everything else is just noise." The venue was a museum that had been transformed for the evening. Ice sculptures flanked the entrance, servers in black ties circulated with champagne, and everywhere Ethan looked were people who belonged to a world he'd only ever seen in movies. He felt immediately out of place despite the custom tuxedo. Victoria took his arm as they entered, a gesture that felt both natural and terrifying. Heads turned. People noticed. A woman in diamonds that could probably pay Ethan's rent for a year actually stopped mid-conversation to stare. "Ignore them," Victoria murmured. "They're just surprised I brought someone." "Do you usually come alone?" "Always." They made their way through the crowd, Victoria stopping occasionally to greet people she knew. Each introduction followed the same pattern. Surprised looks at Ethan, polite questions about how they met, careful probing to figure out who he was and whether he mattered. Ethan gave vague answers about the wedding, about mutual friends, letting people draw their own conclusions. "You're good at this," Victoria said when they finally reached their assigned table. "Good at what? Not giving them anything. Most people either clam up completely or overshare when they're nervous. You're doing exactly the right thing." "I'm just trying not to embarrass you." "You couldn't embarrass me if you tried." She squeezed his hand under the table. "Relax. The hard part's over." The hard part, it turned out, was not over. Dinner was served, some kind of chicken that Ethan was too anxious to taste, and the conversation at their table turned to investments and market trends and things he had no context for. He listened, smiled at appropriate moments, and felt increasingly like an imposter. Then a man across the table addressed him directly. "Ethan, was it? What sector are you in?" "I'm in books," Ethan said, using Victoria's suggested phrasing. "Publishing?" "Retail." "Ah." The man's interest visibly waned. "Independent or chain?" "Independent." "Tough market for that. Everything's moving digital." The man turned to someone else, conversation over. Ethan dismissed as unimportant. Victoria's hand found his under the table again. her fingers interlacing with his. When he glanced at her, she was looking at him with something that might have been apology or solidarity, or both. The speeches started after dinner, people thanking donors, highlighting the charity's work, making appeals for more funding. Victoria had to go up at one point to present some award, and Ethan watched her command the room with the easy confidence of someone who'd done this 100 times. She spoke about education and opportunity and giving back, and people listened with the kind of attention they probably didn't give their own mothers. When she returned to the table, slightly flushed from the applause, Ethan leaned over and whispered, "That was impressive." "That was exhausting," she whispered back. "Can we leave soon?" "I thought you had to stay for the whole thing." "I've made my appearance. I gave my speech. I can leave whenever I want." She stood, offering him her hand. "Come on, let's get out of here." They made their exit during the auction portion of the evening, Victoria stopping only to say goodbye to the event organizer. The cold night air hit them as they stepped outside, and Ethan felt something release in his chest, tension he didn't know he'd been holding. "I'm sorry," Victoria said as they waited for her car. "I should have warned you it would be like that." "Like what?" "Stuffy, pretentious, full of people who judge others based on what they do for a living." "It's fine. I knew what I was signing up for." "Did you?" She turned to face him, her expression troubled. "Because I'm not sure I did. Bringing you into my world and watching people look at you like you don't matter, that was harder than I expected." "Victoria, it's okay. I'm used to being looked through. That guy at the table wasn't the first person to decide I'm not worth talking to, and he won't be the last. But it bothers me. You should bother me." She shook her head, frustrated. "You're more interesting than anyone in that room. You read actual books instead of just business journals. You have real conversations instead of networking. You care about things that matter, and they dismissed you because you work in retail." "To be fair, I do work in retail." "That's not the point." The car pulled up, saving Ethan from having to respond. They rode back to the hotel in silence, Victoria staring out the window at the passing city. Ethan wanted to say something comforting, but he didn't know what. The evening had pulled back a curtain on Victoria's life that he'd been avoiding looking at too closely. The constant performance, the judgment, the way people saw her as a tool or a trophy instead of a person. "Do you want to come up?" he asked when they reached the hotel. "Or do you need to go home?" "I want to come up, if that's okay." They rode the elevator to the 28th floor, still silent. When they entered the suite, they found Mel asleep on the couch, and Jamie crashed out in one of the bedrooms, her elephant clutched tight. Victoria stood at the window, looking out at the lake. The city lights reflected off the water, and in the glass, Ethan could see her reflection, beautiful and sad and somehow smaller than she'd seemed at the gala. "I hate those events," she said quietly. "I hate pretending to care about people who only care about my bank account. I hate making small talk with people who would ignore me if I were poor. I hate feeling like a performing monkey in expensive clothes." "Then why do you go?" "Because it's expected. Because the charity actually does good work. Because if I stop showing up, people will speculate about why." She turned to face him. "Because it's easier to play the part than to explain why I don't want to anymore." Ethan crossed to where she stood, close enough to touch, but not touching. "What would you rather be doing?" "This? Talking to you in a quiet room where nobody's watching or judging or trying to use me for something. That's a low bar. You'd be surprised how few people clear it." Victoria smiled sadly. "I spent the whole dinner wishing we'd just ordered room service and stayed here." "We could do that next time." "There's going to be a next time." "I hope so." Ethan took a breath, deciding to be honest, even if it scared him. "Tonight was uncomfortable and weird, and I felt completely out of place. But I'd do it again if it meant spending time with you." Victoria's eyes searched his face. "Why? What do you get out of this? I'm not making your life easier. I'm pulling you into situations that make you uncomfortable. What's in this for you?" "You," Ethan said simply. "You're in this for me. Talking to you makes my days better. Knowing you're thinking about me makes me feel less alone. And yeah, tonight was hard, but coming back here and seeing you look at me like I actually matter, that's worth more than 1,000 awkward dinners." "You do matter. I know that now. Because you keep showing me." Victoria stepped closer, closing the distance between them. She reached up and touched his face, her hand warm against his cheek. "I want to kiss you. Is that okay?" Ethan's heart stuttered. Yeah, that's okay. She kissed him softly, carefully, like she was afraid he might break. It was nothing like the passionate kisses in movies. It was tentative and sweet and over too quickly. When she pulled back, she was smiling. I've wanted to do that for weeks, she admitted. Me too. Good. She kissed him again, longer this time, and Ethan felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just phone calls and coffee dates anymore. This was real. This was happening. When they finally pulled apart, Victoria rested her forehead against his. I should probably go. It's late and you have Jamie in the morning. Stay, Ethan said. I don't mean anything inappropriate. Just stay. Talk to me. We can sit on the couch and pretend we're normal people for a while. I'd like that. They sat together on the couch where Mel had been sleeping, Victoria curled against Ethan's side. Her shoes kicked off and her expensive dress bunched around her knees. She told him about growing up in Ohio, about a father who'd worked in manufacturing and a mother who'd taught elementary school, about being the first in her family to go to college, about the scholarship that made it possible, about the professor who'd seen something in her that she hadn't seen in herself. I wasn't supposed to end up here, she said. I was supposed to get a good job, make decent money, maybe buy a house in the suburbs. That was the dream. But then I made my first million and everything changed. My family didn't know how to talk to me anymore. My friends from home thought I'd become someone else. And maybe I had. Do you miss it? Your old life? Sometimes it was simpler, less complicated, but I can't go back even if I wanted to. This is who I am now. Ethan understood that feeling. He'd had a different life plan too. Finish college, become a journalist, maybe write books on the side. Then Jamie happened and all those plans evaporated like water on hot pavement. You couldn't go back. You could only move forward and hope you were heading somewhere good. I'm glad you're here, Victoria said sleepily. I'm glad you said yes to tonight. Me too. They sat like that until Victoria's breathing evened out, and Ethan realized she'd fallen asleep against his shoulder. He didn't move, didn't want to disturb her, just sat in the quiet hotel suite holding someone who'd somehow become important to him in the space of a few weeks. His phone buzzed with a text from Mel, sent from the bedroom. You two are cute. Don't wake me up when she leaves. Ethan smiled and set his phone aside. Outside, Chicago continued its endless movement, cars and lights and people living their own complicated lives. Inside, everything was still except for Victoria's soft breathing and the sound of his own heart beating steady and sure. He didn't know what happened next, didn't know if this could last or if their different worlds would eventually pull them apart. But sitting there in the darkness with Victoria asleep against his shoulder, Ethan found he wasn't afraid of the uncertainty anymore. Sometimes you just had to trust that being seen was enough. Victoria was gone when Ethan woke up, but there was a note on the coffee table written on hotel stationery. Had to catch an early flight. Thank you for last night. Call me later. V. Ethan folded the note and put it in his wallet next to her business card, both of them becoming small talismans of something he still didn't quite understand. Through the bedroom door, he could hear Jamie starting to stir, her morning babble about elephants and pancakes filtering into the quiet suite. The next few weeks fell into a pattern that felt both normal and impossible. Victoria called when she could, which was sporadic and unpredictable. Sometimes 3 days would pass in silence. Then she'd call at midnight from an airport somewhere, exhausted and wanting to hear his voice. They managed one more dinner, Thai food at a hole-in-the-wall place Victoria found online, both of them in jeans and hoodies, nobody recognizing her or caring. It felt more real than the gala, more like something that could actually last. But reality had a way of asserting itself in small increments. Christmas was coming, and Ethan was watching his bank account dwindle with each gift he bought for Jamie. The bookstore's holiday rush helped. Mr. Chen gave him extra hours. But it wasn't enough to cover the stack of bills that kept arriving. The heating in his apartment was acting up again, and his landlord's solution was to tell him to wear more sweaters. He didn't tell Victoria about any of this. What would he say? That he was choosing between fixing his heat and buying Jamie new winter boots because she'd outgrown her old ones? That he'd started eating less at dinner so there would be more for Jamie at breakfast? These were his problems, his reality, and they felt too small and embarrassing to share with someone who could probably solve them with a single phone call. But Victoria noticed anyway. She was observant in ways that caught Ethan off guard. The way she'd asked why he always ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, why he never suggested going places that cost money, why he'd mentioned the same pair of shoes 3 times because they were the only decent ones he owned. "Ethan," she said during a phone call the week before Christmas, "can I ask you something without you getting defensive?" "That depends on the question. Are you okay? Financially?" His first instinct was to lie, to play it off like everything was fine. But he was tired of pretending, tired of the mental gymnastics required to hide how broke he actually was. "No, I'm not okay financially. I'm barely making rent. Jamie needs new clothes every 3 months because she keeps growing, and my car is making a noise that probably means it's going to die soon. But I'm managing. We're not starving or homeless, so it could be worse." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because..." "What would I tell you? That I'm poor? You already know that. That I struggle? That's obvious. What exactly would telling you accomplish except making me feel more pathetic than I already do?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "You're not pathetic. I feel pathetic. I'm 32 years old and I can barely afford to heat my apartment. Meanwhile, you're flying to New York for meetings and staying in hotels that cost more per night than I make in a week. The distance between our lives isn't just big, Victoria. It's insurmountable." "It doesn't have to be. Doesn't it? Be honest with yourself. What future does this have, you and me? You'll eventually get tired of slumming it with the poor single dad, and I'll be left feeling stupid for thinking this could work." "Is that really what you think?" Her voice was sharp now, hurt. "That this is some kind of charity case for me? That I'm just passing time until I get bored?" "I don't know what to think anymore." "Then let me be clear. I don't care about your bank account. I don't care that you work at a bookstore or that you can't afford expensive dinners. I care about you, the person you are, the father you are to Jamie, the way you see the world. That's what matters to me." "But it's not sustainable, Victoria. You can't keep paying for everything." "Why not?" "Because it's not fair, because it makes me feel like I'm using you." "You're not using me. I'm choosing to spend money on things that make me happy, and being with you makes me happy." She paused. "Unless being with me doesn't make you happy anymore." "That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying?" Ethan sat down on his couch, suddenly exhausted. Jamie was at preschool, the apartment was quiet, and he was having an argument he didn't know how to win because he wasn't even sure what he was fighting for. "I'm saying I don't know how to do this. How to be with someone whose life is so different from mine that we might as well live on different planets. We figure it out. Together. That's what people do when they care about each other." "Do you? Care about me?" "Yes, Ethan. I care about you. More than I've cared about anyone in a long time. And it terrifies me because I don't know how to do this either. I don't know how to be with someone who doesn't want my money or my connections or anything except me. But I want to try. Don't you?" He did. That was the problem. He wanted it so badly that it scared him, this possibility of something good in a life that had been defined by managing expectations and making do with less. "Yeah, I want to try." "Then stop pushing me away." Her voice softened. "Let me in, Ethan. All the way in. Let me see the parts you think are too ugly or too broken or too poor. I promise I won't run." "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay." 2 days later, Victoria showed up at the bookstore unannounced. Ethan was helping a customer find a book on gardening when he looked up and saw her browsing the fiction section like it was the most natural thing in the world. She was dressed down, jeans and a peacoat, but she still stood out, something about her presence commanding attention even when she wasn't trying. Mr. Chen noticed her immediately. "Your interesting woman is here." "I see that." "She's pretty." "I know." "Don't mess this up." Ethan walked over to where Victoria was pretending to read the back of a mystery novel. "You're here." "I wanted to see where you worked. Is that weird?" "A little, but good weird." She smiled and put the book back. "Give me the tour." There wasn't much to tour. Lakeshore Books occupied a narrow storefront with overstuffed shelves and a distinct smell of old paper and coffee. But Ethan walked her through it anyway, pointing out his favorite sections, introducing her to Mrs. Patterson, who was browsing romance novels, and immediately tried to set him up with her granddaughter, despite Victoria standing right there. "She's relentless," Ethan explained after they escaped Mrs. Patterson's matchmaking attempts. "I like her. She cares about you." "In her way, yeah." Victoria ran her fingers along a shelf of poetry books. "This place is great. It feels real, like it has a soul. Most days it feels like it's held together with duct tape and stubbornness. That's what gives it soul. She turned to face him. Can I take you to lunch? I'm working until 3. Then dinner, tonight. I'll cook. You cook? I'm mediocre at it, but I try. She smiled. Say yes, please. Mr. Chen, who had apparently been eavesdropping, called out from the register. Say yes, Ethan. I'll close up tonight. You don't have to do that. I know I don't have to. Say yes. Ethan looked at Victoria, at the hope in her eyes, and felt his resistance crumble. Yes, but I need to pick up Jamie from my sister's by 7. I'll have you home by 6:30. Victoria's apartment was in a building Ethan had walked past 100 times but never imagined entering. The doorman greeted her by name, the elevator required a key card for the penthouse level, and when the doors opened directly into her living space, Ethan stopped breathing for a moment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. The furniture was modern and expensive without being cold. Books lined one entire wall. Actual books, not just decorative spines. And the kitchen looked like something from a magazine. It was beautiful and intimidating and nothing like the cramped apartment Ethan called home. I know it's a lot, Victoria said, watching his reaction. It's amazing. It's lonely. She set her bag down on the counter. I bought it 3 years ago because it's what successful people do. Get a showpiece apartment in a good building. But most nights I just sit here by myself wishing I had somewhere smaller and warmer to be. Ethan walked to the windows, looking out at Chicago spread below them. From up here, the city looked manageable, contained. His own neighborhood was somewhere in that grid of lights and buildings, but from this height it was impossible to pick out. Why did you really invite me here? Because I want you to see my life. All of it. The nice apartment, and the loneliness, and the fact that money doesn't actually solve anything important. She joined him at the window. And because I want to tell you something I've been thinking about for weeks. What? Victoria took a breath. I want to invest in something. Not a company or a startup. A person. You. Ethan turned to look at her. What does that mean? It means I've been thinking about what you said at the wedding, about wishing you could have your own bookstore, about how you wanted to write but life got in the way. And I think you should do it. Victoria, hear me out. I'm not offering charity, I'm offering a business opportunity. You have knowledge and passion for books. You understand customers and what makes a bookstore work. What you don't have is capital. That's where I come in. You want to give me money to open a bookstore. I want to invest in a bookstore run by someone who actually cares about books. It's a sound business decision. Ethan felt anger flash through him, hot and unexpected. No, it's not. Independent bookstores are dying. You said it yourself, everything's going digital. This isn't a sound business decision. It's you trying to solve my problems with your money. Maybe it's both. I don't want your money, Victoria. Why not? Why is it okay for me to spend thousands on a hotel suite or a gala ticket, but not okay for me to invest in something that actually matters? Because those things don't change anything fundamental between us. But this, Ethan gestured helplessly, this would. I'd be dependent on you. Everything I built would be because of your money, not my work. How could I ever feel like an equal in this relationship? You're already equal. Money doesn't change that, doesn't it? Be honest, Victoria. You have more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. I have $53 in my checking account until next Friday. We're not equal. We're not even playing the same game. Victoria's expression hardened. So what are you saying? That we can't be together because I have money and you don't? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It's not stupid, it's realistic. It's self-sabotage. She crossed her arms. You're so scared of being seen as lesser that you won't let anyone actually help you. You'd rather struggle alone than accept support from someone who cares about you. That's not fair, isn't it? I've watched you turn down every gesture, every offer, every attempt I've made to make your life easier. At what point does pride become just another form of self-harm? They stared at each other, the distance between them feeling infinite, despite being only a few feet apart. Ethan wanted to walk out, to end this before it got worse, but his feet wouldn't move. I don't know how to do this, he said finally. I don't know how to be with you without feeling like I'm taking advantage. And I don't know how to accept help without feeling like I've failed. Victoria's expression softened. Then maybe that's what we need to figure out. Together. Because I'm not going anywhere, Ethan. I don't care how much you push me away or how many times you tell me this won't work. I'm here. And I'm not leaving unless you explicitly tell me you don't want me in your life. I want you in my life. Then stop fighting me on everything else. She stepped closer. Let me invest in the bookstore, not as charity, but as a real business. We'll draw up papers, make it official. You'll have full creative control. You'll pay me back if it succeeds. And if it fails, we'll figure something else out. But give yourself a chance to build something instead of just surviving. Ethan looked at her, at the hope and frustration and something deeper in her eyes, and felt something break inside him. Not break apart, but break open. Why do you care this much? Because you're the first person in years who's looked at me and seen Victoria instead of Victoria Hale, billionaire. Because you make me laugh and you call me out when I'm being ridiculous, and you don't want anything from me except my time and attention. Because I think I'm falling in love with you, and that terrifies me more than any business deal ever has. The words hung in the air between them, impossible to take back. Ethan felt his heart doing acrobatics in his chest. You're falling in love with me? Yeah, I am. She said it simply, honestly. And I know that's fast and probably stupid, but there it is. Ethan closed the distance between them, took her face in his hands, and kissed her. Not carefully like before, but desperately, like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I'm falling in love with you too, he whispered, and it scares the hell out of me. Good. We can be scared together. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in Victoria's expensive apartment with the city spread below them like a promise. Then Ethan pulled back and looked at her seriously. If we do this, the bookstore thing, we do it right. Legal papers, clear terms, everything official. I don't want there to be any confusion about what this is. Deal. And I pay you back, even if it takes 20 years. Deal. And you have to promise me something else. What? That this isn't about fixing me or solving my problems. That you actually believe in this as a business. Victoria smiled. I wouldn't put my money into something I didn't believe in. I've seen you talk about books, Ethan. I've watched you with customers at the store. You have something most business people spend their whole lives trying to find. You actually give a damn. That's worth investing in. 3 months later, on a cold March afternoon, Ethan stood in front of an empty storefront on Diversey Avenue and tried to believe this was real. The space was small, smaller than he'd imagined, but it had good bones. Big windows facing the street, exposed brick on one wall, enough room for shelves and a reading area, and maybe a small coffee counter if they were creative. Victoria stood beside him, Jamie perched on her hip like it was the most natural thing in the world. Over the past months, Victoria had become a regular presence in their lives, showing up for dinner at Ethan's apartment, reading Jamie bedtime stories in funny voices, existing in the ordinary chaos of their days without complaint. What do you think? Victoria asked. I think it's perfect. You said that about the last 3 places we looked at. This one I actually mean. Ethan pulled out the key the realtor had given him and unlocked the door. Inside, the space smelled like dust and old paint, but he could see past that. Could see shelves lining the walls, comfortable chairs by the windows, a children's section in the back where Jamie could play while he worked. We'll need to renovate, Victoria said, walking through the space with the practiced eye of someone who'd evaluated hundreds of properties. New floors, better lighting, the bathroom is a disaster, but the location is good. Foot traffic, parking near the Brown line. How much is this going to cost? Don't worry about that right now. Let's just make sure it's what you want. Ethan watched Jamie toddle around the empty space, her little footsteps echoing. This was what he wanted. Not just the bookstore, but this. Victoria holding his daughter like she belonged there. A future that felt possible instead of just survivable. A life that had room for dreams alongside responsibility. Yeah, he said, this is what I want. The renovation took 6 weeks. Ethan spent every free moment at the space, painting walls and assembling shelves, while Victoria managed contractors and permits and all the business aspects he didn't understand. Mr. Chen came by to offer advice, bringing his own expertise from decades of running Lakeshore Books. Mel helped paint the children's section, declaring it the most fun she'd had in years. Jamie loved it. She'd claimed a corner as her special spot, where Ethan set up a small table and chairs just her size. Victoria had bought her a toy cash register and some pretend books, and Jamie spent hours working alongside her father, ringing up imaginary sales. "What are you going to name it?" Mel asked one evening while they were installing the last of the shelving units. Ethan had been thinking about that for weeks. He'd considered clever literary references, meaningful quotes, combinations of words that sounded sophisticated. But standing in the space that was about to become his, watching Jamie play in her corner while Victoria argued with a contractor about light fixtures, the answer felt obvious. "The reading room," he said. "Simple, clear. It tells people exactly what we are." "I like it," Victoria said from across the room. "It's honest." Honest. That felt right. This whole venture was built on honesty. Honest conversations about money and expectations, honest assessments of risk and reward, honest feelings that had grown from a chance meeting at a wedding into something neither of them had planned for. Opening day was set for May 1st. Ethan spent the week before in a state of controlled panic, organizing and reorganizing shelves, checking inventory, making sure every detail was perfect. Victoria had wanted to hire staff, but Ethan had insisted on starting small, just him, at least at first, to see if this could actually work. The night before the opening, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at his ceiling, thinking about all the ways this could fail. What if nobody came? What if people came but didn't buy anything? What if he'd made a massive mistake and was about to waste Victoria's investment? His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "You awake?" "Yeah, can't sleep." "Me neither. Want to meet at the store?" 20 minutes later, they stood in the reading room together, surrounded by books and the smell of fresh paint. The street outside was quiet, just the occasional car passing and the distant sound of the city that never fully slept. "I'm terrified," Ethan admitted. "Good. That means you care." Victoria took his hand. "It's going to be great, Ethan. People are going to love it." "How do you know?" "Because you built it with love. That's what makes a place special. Not the money invested or the fancy fixtures, but the fact that someone actually cares." She looked around the space. "You did this. You took an empty room and turned it into something meaningful. That's not nothing. I couldn't have done it without you. Maybe, but I didn't stock these shelves or design the layout or choose every single book because you thought someone might need it. That was all you." She squeezed his hand. "I just provided the capital. You provided the vision." At exactly 10 a.m. on May 1st, Ethan unlocked the door to the reading room for the first time. He'd half expected nobody to show up, but there was already a small crowd waiting outside. Mr. Chen and the regulars from Lakeshore Books, Mel with Jamie on her shoulders, Mrs. Patterson ready to browse romance novels in a new location, and a handful of neighbors curious about what was opening in their area, and Victoria. She was the first person through the door, dressed casually like she was just another customer, a genuine smile on her face. "Welcome to the reading room," Ethan said, his voice slightly shaky. "Please look around." The morning passed in a blur of customers and sales and conversations about books. People browsed, bought things, left promising to come back. It wasn't overwhelming. Ethan wasn't going to retire on his first day's sales, but it felt real, like something that could actually sustain itself. Around 2 p.m., during a quiet moment, Victoria approached the counter with a single book, a worn copy of The Little Prince from the used section. "Just this one," she said. Ethan rang it up, playing along. "That'll be $8. She handed him a 10. "Keep the change." Big spender. "I try." She took the book and the receipt. "This was my favorite as a child. My mom used to read it to me." "The fox's line about taming?" "Yeah. You become responsible forever for what you've tamed." Victoria looked at him seriously. "I get it now. What that means." Ethan understood. She was talking about them, about how they'd tamed each other over these months, become responsible for each other's hearts in ways that were terrifying and wonderful. He'd spent so long being responsible only for Jamie, defining himself entirely through fatherhood, that he'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen as more than just a parent. Victoria had reminded him he was allowed to be a person too. The rest of the afternoon passed quickly. By closing time, Ethan's feet hurt and his voice was hoarse from talking, but he felt something he hadn't felt in years: pride. Not the defensive pride that came from protecting his dignity, but genuine satisfaction in something he'd built. After the last customer left, Victoria helped him count the register while Jamie colored at her special table in the children's section. "How'd we do?" Victoria asked. $463 in sales, minus expenses. That's probably a loss for the day, but it's a start. It's more than a start, it's proof of concept. She closed the register. "I'm proud of you." "You say that like you're surprised." "I'm not surprised. I always knew you could do this. I'm just happy you know it now too." Ethan looked around his bookstore. His bookstore. Those words still felt foreign, and felt something loosen in his chest. For 3 years, he'd been operating in survival mode, focused entirely on getting through each day without falling apart. But standing here, in this space he'd helped create, watching his daughter color while the woman he loved organized receipts, he realized he'd somehow stumbled into something bigger than just surviving. He'd built a life, messy and complicated, and nothing like what he'd planned, but his nonetheless. "Thank you," he said to Victoria, "for believing in this when I couldn't. Thank you for letting me." She came around the counter and hugged him. "For letting me be part of your life." Jamie looked up from her coloring. "Are you guys being mushy again?" "Yes," Ethan and Victoria said at the same time. "Gross." Jamie returned to her picture, uninterested in adult emotions. That night, after Victoria went home and Jamie was asleep, Ethan sat in his small apartment with a beer he'd bought to celebrate and thought about the strange path that had led him here. A forgotten table at a wedding. A woman who'd chosen to sit with him when she could have sat anywhere else. Conversations that turned into phone calls that turned into something neither of them had expected. People talked about fate like it was some grand design, but Ethan didn't believe that. He believed in choices, small ones, made every day, that added up to something bigger. Victoria had chosen to sit with him. He'd chosen to answer her calls. They'd both chosen to keep showing up for each other even when it was scary and uncertain. Those choices had led to this. A bookstore with his name above the door, a daughter who was happy and healthy, and someone who loved him not despite his struggles but including them, seeing all of him and deciding he was worth the complications. It wasn't a fairy tale. There was no magical transformation, no moment where everything suddenly became easy. Ethan still worried about money, still struggled with the balance between being a father and being his own person, still had days where he felt like he was barely holding it together. But he wasn't alone anymore. And that made all the difference. 6 months later, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, Ethan stood behind the counter of the reading room and watched Victoria read to a group of children gathered on the floor of the kids' section. She'd started doing this once a week, Storytime with Ms. Victoria, and it had become one of the store's most popular events. Jamie sat in the front row, rapt with attention even though she'd heard this particular story a dozen times. The store was doing better than expected. Not making Ethan rich by any measure, but sustainable. He'd hired a part-time employee to help with busy periods, and he'd started carrying local authors' work on consignment. Mr. Chen had even started referring customers to him when Lakeshore didn't have what they needed. More importantly, Ethan had started writing again. Nothing serious yet, just observations and character sketches in a notebook he kept under the counter. But it felt good to let that part of himself exist again. Victoria had encouraged it, told him that having multiple creative outlets wasn't selfish, it was necessary. She finished the story to enthusiastic applause from the children. Parents started gathering their kids, some stopping to browse, while others purchased books before heading home. It was a routine Ethan had come to cherish, the rhythm of a successful business, the small interactions that made each day unique. "Good story time?" he asked when Victoria came to the counter. Jamie corrected my pronunciation of antelope in front of everyone. Very humbling. She's a perfectionist. I wonder where she gets that. Victoria leaned against the counter. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Remember at the wedding when you felt invisible?" Ethan thought back to that November night that felt like a lifetime ago. "Yeah." "Do you still feel that way?" He considered the question seriously. Did he? He was still the same person, still a single dad working a job that most people didn't consider impressive, still struggling with bills and responsibilities. But something fundamental had shifted. He'd built something that mattered. He'd let someone in who saw him clearly. He'd stopped defining himself by what he lacked and started appreciating what he had. "No," he said finally, "I don't feel invisible anymore." "Good," Victoria smiled. "Because you never were." You just needed someone to help you see that. That night, after closing, Ethan walked home with Jamie on his shoulders and Victoria beside him. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets wet and reflective, catching the glow of streetlights and shop windows. They were just three people walking through Chicago, unremarkable to anyone passing by. But to Ethan, it felt like everything. This small moment of ordinary happiness, earned through months of fear and uncertainty and choosing to trust when trust felt impossible. He'd started at a forgotten table, invisible and alone. He'd ended up here, seen, loved, part of something bigger than himself. Sometimes all it took to change a life was someone choosing not to let you sit alone. And sometimes, if you were brave enough to let them stay, that choice became the foundation for everything else that followed. Ethan looked at Victoria, at Jamie chattering about her day, at the bookstore behind them with its lights still glowing in the windows. This was his life now. Imperfect and complicated and nothing like what he'd planned. But it was his, and he'd built it one choice at a time, one moment of courage at a time, one person at a time who decided he was worth knowing. And that, he thought as they turned the corner toward home, was more than enough. It was everything.